Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today. It's Passkeys week. I'm Megan Shamus. I am the CMO of the FIDO Alliance, and I am happy to have several smart individuals with me today to answer all of your pressing Passkeys related questions. To kick things off, let's just have everybody introduce themselves. And I already have a lot of questions in the queue, so we can get going. Let's start with Rue. And then we'll go and we'll introduce ourselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Farouk Islam. I work at a company called Dashlane, which produces a password manager, and I'm the Director of Product Innovation here.
I can go next.
Yes.
Hi everyone, my name is Niharika. I work as a Senior Developer Relations Engineer for Android at Google, and I have been there with Passkeys for the last 3 years, and it's been an amazing journey to see apps and websites go passwordless, and we are still doing great on that. And we are here to answer all your questions around Passkeys and more. Over to you, Christian.
Yeah, let's get all the Google folks out of the way. Hi, everyone. I'm Christian. I've been working on passkey initiatives here at Google for a while. Before that, did a lot of work on the FIDO security key standard here at Google, which we started for our internal employee workforce, which obviously then transitioned into passkeys. Happy to be here and happy to help I guess push forward the passkey narrative. It's been very, very successful at Google, and would love to get other companies to join us in deployments.
Tim.
My name is Tim Capali. I'm a standards architect at Okta. I work on all things digital credentials, including passkeys.
Well, great. So welcome to our webinar. You have a question widget, and this is an AMA, so that's what we're looking for. We already have questions coming in. So to get let's get started. Many questions already. What is the most common question that you get for folks that are just getting started with passkeys? And I know that is a broad question, but let's narrow it down to from a developer perspective. What is like the most common question that you get? And what is a quick advice that you would give to somebody just getting started? Somebody raise their hand. Christian, you seem eager to answer.
Yeah, I seem to eager. I feel like other folks probably have even better perspectives on this, so I'd love to hear Niharika's view on this one too. But I'll start. I think the number one thing that I keep hearing is what is passkeys going to do to my sign-in funnel, right? I think at Google we track sign-in metrics. We keep like a hawk eye on these things, and we want to make sure that it's easy for users to get into the front door. And originally, when we started down the FIDO path, the adoption and the deployment of FIDO was mainly around security, right? It was, we were willing to take a bit of a hit on user experience if we could bump the security up. I think for us, since we've started down the path in 2022, 2023, things have shifted a little bit for us, where passkeys are now, of course, still around security, and we'd love to, getting users in through phishing resistant means. But the other side of the coin is that passkeys are actually proven now to be easier to use for our users than traditional sign-in mechanisms. And I think that's great data. And I can't remember exactly when we started seeing that crossover. I think it was maybe about like a year, 15 months ago, where we started seeing users get so comfortable with passkey technology that the success rate of passkey signings are now by far surpassing the success rates of traditional authentication, such as passwords. So I think that's the number one thing I keep hearing. And also I have great data now that we can share and saying that, hey, really, we are able to help users get in the front door in a much more streamlined manner than before. So why wouldn't one want to adopt passkeys? Like, it helps your user sign in, it helps the security. It's kind of like a win-win on all fronts. I don't know, Niharika, if you have anything else you want to add from the Google side.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's one of the common questions we are getting. And of course, there's one question which now is still floating around when we go to any developer conferences is actually like just starting with the very initial thing, which is why to use passkeys. Why do I even switch to passkeys? And that has been there with all the developers who really want to understand how authentication and security or privacy tie together. If you think today, like passkeys are the future, as you will often see us saying that a lot of times today. Uh, Passkeys are the safest option authentication mechanism, which you would see your every app currently is being adopting that, and it's very easy. Trust me, it's very easy. It's if you care about your users' security and safety, and also the seamlessness, there are a lot of advantages with which passkey comes in, and definitely try it out on. Maybe you could just go to any app right now you have with maybe TikTok, Meta, any they are using it, and you should always relate this with not on any complexity. I would say if you really care about the user security, you should definitely try to check like how exactly is this solving that for users. And I think we should be really vouching for that security aspect. The other thing I think I get it more often is what would happen like if I just lose my phone? Am I actually gonna logged out of my account or lose my credentials? Actually, no. Passkeys sync via your password managers to other devices. So if you get a new phone, you could actually just sign into your Google or other accounts, and your keys would come back. So it's very easy. As we say, security and seamlessness, Passkeys just bring that.
So it sounds like business case is still the kind of the pressing question for folks. So it's not, is it technology, or is it just building the business case within an organization? Because to me, what you're saying is that you're having to prove the business case rather than the technology being a hurdle. Is it easy enough to implement, and is it really just building a business case that is what a barrier is at the moment? Is that fair?
If we actually have to think, if we go 2 years back, business use case was one of the P0, I would say, that was there, where we really had to pitch why exactly you need passkeys for your users. But if you ask, after we had all these 3 years watching about passkeys, currently the developers understand the intention behind using this technology. But yes, still, I think we have a lot of scope to improve on how we make the users aware and educate around passkeys. So that's one other thing which I see as my focus at Google, that we really, really want the users to understand why passkeys. So it's now more on users rather than the business use case.
So questions coming in hot and quick. Tim, question about, we talk a lot about, passkeys, consumer experience. Is there barriers on the workforce side? And like, if so, what are they? A lot of the questions in here are about deploying to workforce on the workforce side. So
yep.
Are there barriers there, or like, can you give any advice?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing to remember about passkeys, it's a bring your own key ecosystem, right? So, what's available by default to consumers is a sync passkey, because that is what's best for consumers. If you are allowing consumer devices in the workforce, then you either need to provide the users an authenticator that meets your requirements, or use what they have, right? And that's probably the biggest decision point. So there are users in every organization, maybe with the exception of the government, where sync passkeys are more than enough for the user. Where I typically recommend drawing the line is, does the user only have access to their own data, or do they have access to other people's data? And that's usually when the security decision on which way to go comes in. So what I mean by your own data, like time cards and paychecks, right? There's a significant number of staff at every organization that just needs to access their time card and, you know, access their pay stubs, and once you access their tax form. And asking them to go through and enroll like a very high assurance security key or even an app on their phone just to access those things doesn't make a ton of sense. But the minute, you know, you have an employee who does have access to other people's data, whether it's other employees or customers, that conversation changes, and all of the existing kind of threat modeling and logic you've used in the past doesn't change here. If you have certain security requirements, you need to use authenticators that meet those security requirements. The nice thing that passkeys do bring, right? This, if we think of passkeys kind of holistically over the past few years, this change has, in my opinion, been actually the best for workforce because there's a lot of new options available for workforce. So all of the same plumbing, for lack of a better term, that is used for sync passkeys is also available for workforce authenticators and workforce credential managers. So what that means is like when you, the previous option was like you had to issue everyone a hardware security key, which I just want to say is still a very good option and should be considered. But there may be cases where that's not possible. You actually do have the option to deploy a workforce authenticator or credential manager on a user's unmanaged device without managing the device and actually have control over that key and have a device-bound passkey. And that's the thing I think I'm most excited about for workforce, right? If we think about managed devices, like you can do whatever you want on a managed device with an asterisk, right? Of course, but like, you know, you have full control over that device. And managed versus unmanaged is, I think, the most important differentiation. Not whether it's BYOD, I hate that term, right? It's who owns it, right? And whether
it's a very 2015 term.
What's that?
It's a very 2015 term.
Yeah, so it's like, can you enforce policy on the device or can you not? And then part of policy is it device owned or not, which policies you put, but that's the dividing line. So if you are allowing even a personal phone, right? Like the nice thing is you could tell the user, hey, you can use a security key and you have to carry this thing around, or you can optionally use this like credential manager that you just install and sign in once, and that has your workforce passkey available. And that's super exciting, right? Again, I think most users are going to choose the security key, and the choice is really important, especially in parts of the world where you cannot make a user use their own phone. But if you give them the choice, then all of a sudden it's their choice, right? So a lot of options. You know, security keys still will be great for bootstrapping, right? Like, you know, at Okta, for example, we all get a security key that we use like once every 2 years when we need to set up a new device. But the flexibility for this concept of an unmanaged a credential manager on an unmanaged device that has a key that is up to your standard is really great. And I'll close with one other thing that this really helps with is the flows that you will see, like an enrollment flow for a passkey, again, on an unmanaged consumer device, are going to always be tailored towards consumer scenarios because that's the context the user's in. So one of the benefits we have with this managed credential manager, we can actually eliminate the need to do a passkey enrollment in the front channel, like through that flow. And it just kind of appears in their workforce authenticator. And now they go through these really nice sign-in flows. The issue has never been on sign-in, it's really on the create flow where the user has to select where they want to put it. And that doesn't meet the criteria because it's not the work. So if we can eliminate that step, we've like eliminated 90% of the confusion for users, which is a huge win.
Thank you. So brass tacks, and I would have asked this question at the onset of our talk, but the question came in later. So, and we do, so FIDO, the FIDO 2 and passkeys. FIDO Alliance, our most common way that folks get into our website is through searching for FIDO 2. And so I just want to clear the air in terms of like, okay, what are passkeys in terms of like specifications? Like what's FIDO 2 and what are passkeys and how should people think about that? Because there's no silly questions, by the way, because they said it might be a silly question. There are no silly questions. So can someone quickly explain what the relationship is, what passkeys are versus FIDO 2, so we can, you know, level set for everybody? I feel like that is a Tim question.
Yeah, I mean, they're simple. Like, I think of passkeys as the consumer term for these things that are these credentials that are used via FIDO 2 WebAuthn, right? So you think of FIDO 2 and WebAuthn as the protocol stack. We kind of use them interchangeably, but most of it's in WebAuthn, right, which is the JavaScript API that's in the browser. There's also all the equivalents that live on the platform layer, right, so you can use it with a native app. And then the FIDO2 spec itself handles interactions with authenticators that like plug in or you tap to your device. It also handles the cross-device flow that you use to use your phone to your laptop. So all that is like plumbing, but the thing that's created is a passkey, and that is originally started as a very end user centric term. Like we had kind of these different technical definitions, but we've kind of all just landed on passkey. And then the technical nuance, right, for an admin, for example, a tenant admin is device bound versus synced. We typically don't expose that to users, but GitHub has a nice example, like there's a little like badge next to it says like synced to this device, right, which is helpful in case the user does have a security key. A lot of GitHub users do have passkeys on security keys. So a lot of ways you can skin that, but it's all the same WebAuthn protocol. We actually made very few changes to support passkeys. It was mostly like I would call them optimizations, but yeah, it's the same old stack. And the nice thing is you can still again save them on a security key if you want to. The support is even wider now for security keys because passkeys as a whole has grown.
Same FIDO that you know and love with enhanced capabilities.
Yeah. I just want to add like how we want like term it as very like keep it very simple is FIDO2 the device bound, passkeys the discoverable multi-device credential, and if your use case really requires you to be device bound and not share the credentials, have FIDO2. Otherwise, if you want the credentials to be synced across devices, please go for passkeys. And a lot of apps have and websites have that use case too. So they can definitely check out FIDO2. But yes, with passkeys, you also get an advantage that if you lose your device, like you are not really locked out of your account because these credentials are always synced across. So yeah.
I'm just going through there's a lot of questions and I want to make sure that we're.
Should I just kind of rapid fire tackle? Should I just rapid fire tackle some of these?
You can, but tell me which one it is, please.
Let's see. I could take some of the developer ones. Dave Bush, how are FIDO Alliance and Passkeys preparing for the shift in post-quantum computing? The beauty of WebAuthn is it's crypto agile, right? So the spec is already ready. It can support post-quantum algorithms now. Yubico actually demonstrated publicly during Authenticate last month. This is already working, so it's just a matter of authenticators updating to create post-quantum passkeys, which is wonderful. That was kind of the beauty of the way WebAuthn is specified, is that it doesn't take strong opinions on algorithms. It suggests defaults, but it's once essentially the reference spec from IETF is updated, which is done, then they just kind of work. There is some small amount of work that needs to happen in CTAP to handle some algorithms that happen between like a client and a security key, and that work is ongoing now. But for like synced passkeys, that can happen, and the actual key itself on the security key, that is all ready to go.
I like question 23, which is we as an IDP started moving to passkeys this year. Compatibility in the like the built-in browsers is kind of a given, but in terms of the password managers and plugins, like how can folks think about compatibility? And Rue, I'm going to point to you on this, but like, is there a way for folks to understand how what we sort of call them third-party password managers, but those that are plugging in, how can folks understand like where compatibility is at? And like,
yeah, I think it goes back to what Tim was saying regarding like bring your own key. If a password manager supports passkeys, it's going to work just as it does with any other sync provider. So as long as the user's using the password manager on the platform they're on, it's going to work. So I don't think there's a compatibility issue when it comes to password managers or third-party password managers, other than the fact that it may depend on what platform your provider is on. So most password managers are available on all platforms, be that iOS, Android, or desktop, Mac and Windows. And I think that's one of the benefits of third-party providers, right? They work across platforms. Like the platform password manager, whether it's Google, Microsoft, or Apple, will be working really well on certain ecosystems, perhaps not so much on others. So I would say that's where the compatibility aspect comes in. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
I mean, there's also some developer questions in there, right? So like from a password manager running as a browser extension is not considered a full WebAuthn client. It's kind of mimicking some of the behavior. That is not how password managers should be integrating with platforms. So I would actually recommend that if you run into issues, open support tickets, right? There are actually native APIs on all major consumer platforms that passkey providers should be plugging into. And that actually improves takes away 99% of the concerns. Most of the user experience related issues are from conflicting UIs coming from a browser extension. So I just want to say, like, from my lens, like that is unacceptable. And I hope we can continue to push on providers to natively integrate with the APIs that are available. And that will give you things like you mentioned, public key credential to JSON, all these methods that are implemented by the WebAuthn client. You get all that kind of stuff for free. So.
And it's worth noting that all of the folks that, like the password manager folks, built in, they're all part of the FIDO Alliance and are, working towards having experiences that make sense technically as well as from a UX perspective. So, but if you notice things, you should reach out and talk to us about those things, because we are actively trying to make these experiences more seamless and technically sound. So kind of back on the consumer side. So Google has great numbers in terms of moving folks to passkeys, sign-in success, et cetera. But do you see anything in terms of like demographics of, and we get this question a lot of like, do older folks, are they into this? Is it like a younger folk thing? Do you keep track of like demographics when it comes to passkeys and sign-ins? And do you see any differentiation like amongst different age groups?
I'm happy to talk to that one a little bit, since it has to do with Google's own user base. So I guess the simple answer is we don't have that data sliced in that way. All that I can talk about here will be anecdotal in nature. We have no direct correlation, I guess, with different age groups on the passkey side. Passkey adoption, I will say, on the Google accounts have reached, I want to say historic highs, but that kind of makes sense, right? Because over time, we kind of expect that number to grow. But when we think about Google accounts that are active, that are in use, of course, we've got a large population of users where there are perhaps dormant accounts, not counting them necessarily because those users might not have logged in a while. But if we look at actual active Google accounts being used, we have reached that tipping point where essentially a higher percentage of users now use passkeys than not. This is also more heavily concentrated on certain platforms. I think in particular, our users on iOS, I think the Apple team has done a great job with the passkey implementation there. We're seeing very, very high opt-in and success rates on the iOS platform, also because of familiarity with terms such as Touch ID and Face ID. Users are familiar with those, and that, I would say, goes across the spectrum, right? It doesn't matter what age the users are. This is like across the board. If you see a user that's familiar with the platform, familiar with those terms, opt-in rates are very, very high. What I will say is we are getting to the point of diminished returns a little bit now, where if folks I haven't seen this yet when you log into a Google account, and it has been like this for the last almost 2 years. When you log into a Google account today, if you're on a passkey eligible device, we will prompt you to create a passkey for that device if you don't have one already. I feel like we've reached the users now who's likely to say yes to that kind of question. The users that says no are not necessarily users who don't understand the technology or anything like that. It is, I kind of like call them the users who are kind of like in a hurry to get some job done, right? There are lots of users who are using consumer Google accounts for businesses and other types of services. And these users just don't, it seems on the surface like these users don't have time to go down these side quests and side path. I think the onus is now on us to try and figure out how do we reach even those highly resistant users. It's not because they don't like passkeys or don't understand it. It's more like they just don't. I mean, it's the issue where, on a computer these days, I look at my kids and like whenever a dialog box appears, they're trying to find the X or press escape just to get the thing to disappear, right? And I ask them, what did it say? And folks are like, no, I don't know. And I'm like, but okay. And I think that's the mindset, the mentality here, right? I've got some end goal in mind. I want to get some job done. I don't have time for all these things that get in my way. How do we get more opinionated about that? And there's two ways to do that. Either number one, you make it so that the user cannot possibly move on without continuing. That might be a little bit harsh. The second option is you start to take some functionality in the product away. Like, let's say there's some sensitive functionality in a particular product. You can tell a user that, hey, you can't do this unless you go back and you go and register that passkey or set that up. I feel like that's probably where we are getting to right now. And that's how we will reach the last 20%. It's kind of like the good 80-20 rule applies here as well. 80% we could kind of like reach through fairly low friction, but that last 20% is fairly hard. And I wouldn't say, again, it's like specific demographics. I would say that are just users with a, like, I need to get things done mentality, don't necessarily have time to do anything else or go down these side paths. And those are the users that we want to focus on come 2026.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We had a really great presentation at Authenticate last month from Roblox. As a parent that has children that play Roblox and have 10 or more accounts because they need alt accounts or whatnot. They have a great passkeys implementation, but when you look at their numbers, it's like, why are people not enrolling passkeys? And it's because of that. I'm just Xing out because a lot of kids are actually enrolling and they're just Xing, right? And they're not all of our kids who have been schooled on what passkeys are, right? So like, it seems like a no-brainer, but there are those folks that are just Xing out, and that makes a lot of sense. But like, those are the people that actually probably need passkeys the most, meaning like they're maybe not signing in frequently, or they have multiple accounts and they need actually to log in from different devices. Those are the people that you actually want to reach. So we need to figure out a way to get to them, which is great. Like it's a great problem to have almost, because it's like we're 80% there and we just need to reach, the rest. Next question is about, again, so it's still, along the same lines, but it's about cross-platform compatibility. So first question is, where are we at with moving across platforms and passkeys? So let's do that one. And then the next question will be like, what are we doing to try to like optimize those flows? So first question is, where are we at with cross-platform capability? Is that a Tim question?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's three different answers here. One is when your passkeys are on your mobile device, you can always use them to sign in cross-device on your desktop, which is really nice, right? And that's not, just to be very, very clear, that is not an experience that users should be doing regularly, right? The goal is that you have your passkeys available on your desktop as well. Think of that cross-device flow as the exception use case. In workforce, it may be more prevalent because, phone, in replacement of a security key might be more common, but it's not designed to be like every time I sign in to my whatever account on my laptop, should I be taking my phone out? But that is an option when you get stuck and like, for whatever reason, maybe you're on a family computer or a shared device or a friend's device and you just want to sign in. And I just want to be very clear as always, like the passkey itself does not move to that device. It's only the assertion that allows you to sign in. So that's always available. Assuming again, users mostly are storing their credentials on their phone at minimum. The other one is you can use a cross-platform credential manager, right? So for example, there are default credential managers that come on certain devices that are already cross-platform. Google Password Manager is a great example. Google Password Manager works wherever Chrome is installed. So it's the default on Android at the system level, on iOS, macOS, Windows, and Linux. As long as Chrome is installed, they're available there. Or you can use a third party like Dashlane or Bitwarden or 1Password to kind of automatically have them available on all platforms. So now the last point is if I was using, let's say, Apple Passwords or Google Password Manager to start, and I wanted to move to Bitwarden, let's say, how do I do that? The FIDO Alliance, Rue and a bunch of the credential managers worked really hard to create this protocol called Credential Exchange Protocol, which allows you to actually, once credential managers implement it, which there is a lot of work going on there. There's already a few that have shipped it, including Apple Passwords. That essentially allows you to securely move your credentials between credential managers. As a kind of big move, right? Like I'm deciding to move my credentials and I'm no longer going to use the old one. You can use these protocols. And the nice thing about that is it solves some of the problems that have happened in the past around like a CSV where everything's plain text on disk, right? So it avoids a lot of those pitfalls and also supports more than just passkeys, right? It supports more or less any type of entry in a credential manager, which is really great. So you have lots of options. As I mentioned, the CX family of specifications are actively being implemented by a large number of providers, and maybe Rue, I don't know if you want anything else.
Yeah, I just want to add that credential exchange does require the provider to opt to implement it. So right now we have Apple who have implemented it and several third-party password managers. Google solution is coming along quite soon, and we hope to see Windows support this in the future as well. Credential exchanges isn't done and dusted. There are lots of functionality we want to add to this feature. Originally, a lot of concerns we saw online were like fears of vendor lock-in, where there wasn't actually a means of extracting passkeys and exporting them and importing them other solutions. We still get concerns around, well, how do you back up passkeys and how do you restore passkeys? And we feel like credential exchange has that possibility that we'd like to develop, maybe perhaps in 2026, which could be actually an interesting solution if, let's say, your provider was to somehow shut down, or you decided to create a backup, but you weren't sure if you'd restore on the same provider. This is something that doesn't really exist today. You kind of have to go through this CSV file path that doesn't include passkeys. And that will allow you to restore in any provider in the future, but it's obviously insecure, it's plain text. So I think we've only just really scratched the surface, I would say, with credential exchange. Right now, as Tim said, it's like if you want to bulk move your items from one provider to another, it helps. But we are thinking about solutions in the future where, let's say, you have contractors join an organization and you want to provide them with particular credentials temporarily, perhaps time boxed. Perhaps these things will be possible now that we have a standard that we can work with. And this is what I think Passkeys have also allowed. When we look at passwords, the standard has allowed us to think about different functionality and evolve the experience as time goes on, because we have something to work on. And the same applies to credential exchange. Now that we have a standard, we can think about evolving it, which is hard to do when you have like non-standard experiences like CSVs or passwords.
I think that kind of begs the question a little bit around, on the consumer side, folks are not waking up every day wanting to think about password managers. Most consumers, we do a lot of UX research at the FIDO Alliance. Consumers don't think of what's built into the browser, like Google Password Manager, as being a password manager. They think of it as a browser autofill thing, or they don't think about it. I mean, why should they, right? But when it comes to passkeys and managing them, there is a component where a password manager is necessary, right? So how is it best for you to communicate with end user consumers about how to deal with what they see as just a prompt from their browser or whatever across different devices? So should they be thinking about password managers and storing everything in one place? Should they be creating passkeys wherever they can? and storing them on those devices and what password manager they have. Like if they're an iOS user on a phone, but PC user with Windows, like how do you advise folks to be thinking about educate their end user consumers on that piece? And that I think could be a true question and a Christian question.
I would say like RPs should really think about how they represent these passkeys that are get created. Like you say, users may not realize where they've saved this passkey. Most of the time, it's going to be the default provider that comes with their system or their browser. Making sure the RP actually has like some sort of setting screen that explains that, oh, you've created a passkey and it is in this provider, the logo's there, the name's there. That really reinforces to the user where this thing has ended up, especially for the early sort of adopters that, or the first few users that start experiencing this, they are going to get confused if they aren't really conscious about this. Passwords don't really require software to manage them. People can just deal with this in their heads. Passkeys do require some technology layer here, whether it's a third-party password manager or a built-in provider. Getting that information from the RP is really helpful. Tech-savvy users will know what they're doing. If the user's just saving that passkey, it may not be obvious where that passkey's ended up. A lot of the questions we get is like, where is the passkey? How can I see it? You can't see it as you can visualize a password, but you can go to the RP and see where it was created, when it was created, which product has it. So that helps users have a mental model about where their passkeys are. And then it doesn't really matter which how many providers you're using, because the RPs are telling you which providers their passkey is you've stored in which product.
I'll maybe add on to that. As with personal hygiene, it would be ideal if everyone practiced good password hygiene, our passkey hygiene. But I mean, that's just not the world we live in yet, right? So I think passkeys are forgiving right now in their implementation. Think about passwords. We just mentioned it, right? A password doesn't require a user to use a password manager. However, if you are going to let your password manager pick a random password for a account, which some users now are doing, then you'd better know which password manager you're using, where that thing is, and how you get back to it, because you just won't be able to remember the password to all your different websites, which are now like unique and they're kind of long and all these other weird things. So you can almost think of a passkey as like a long, unique password that your password manager set up for you. Once you make that leap in password land, which honestly not a whole lot of users have done yet, but they're getting better at it, right? Where folks are saying, you know what, rather than my password manager just for convenience remembering the password that I also have in my head, I'm willing to make that jump to where my password manager will pick the password, store it, and I won't have it in my head anymore. Then you need to start to think more deeply about where these things are stored and how I'm going to get back to it. Now, the passkey implementations most relying parties are doing today, Google being one, is very forgiving. Essentially, it means that if you're going to create the passkey on, I don't know, your Windows machine or even on your Android device or on iOS, if you don't know that you put it in iOS keychain, you just said yes to the prompt that appeared. If you come back next time on a new device and you don't have the passkey, our implementations will usually allow you to get back into the account using whatever other mechanism you had set up before, right? Whether that's a password or whether that's like a magic link, some solutions of that, or whether that is like a account recovery process, which might be a little bit more arduous, right? And might make you think twice next time about, I don't know, paying more attention to where your passkeys are stored. It doesn't really matter because there are ways in which you can get back. So I don't think it's a prerequisite right now if you want to use passkeys to completely understand where you're putting these things and how they're being stored. But there's a huge benefit if you do, because I think ultimately where the industry wants to move towards is we want to start closing down on these, inferior or less secure authentication technologies. We want less passwords, right? We want less magic links. That depends on email addresses, right? All these things can be phished, right? So ultimately, we want to move to a world where passkey is the predominant way of getting back into your account. And for that, we will need users to have some understanding of where they're putting the passkey. And if they buy a new phone, how do they get all their passkeys back on that phone? Now, platforms are making that fairly easy for users. If you're an Android user, just signing back into Android with your same Google account will give you your passkeys back, right? That comes from your Google Password Manager. The same is for iCloud Keychain or whatever it's called nowadays on an Apple, right? You just get your iPhone, you sign into it, and things work. If you are a user who uses a third-party password manager, that's great. That basically already means that you are practicing good password and passkey hygiene because you made the decision to invest in that particular product. If you use those third-party products, I mean, Ru can talk all about that, then of course, all your passkeys and all your passwords is going to come back. Doesn't matter which platform you're on. And that's the big benefit of perhaps using a cross-platform solution, right? Doesn't matter if you're on Windows or on Android or anywhere else, you have all these things available to you. So I would say if you are, maybe people listening here is not the audience necessarily for this conversation, but if you're someone or you are advising someone who doesn't have a password manager and don't want to understand password managers, don't dissuade them from using passkeys. It's fine. They can just say yes to the prompt. It'll work as while they're on that device. And if they get a new device in the same ecosystem, things will kind of likely work for them. But really what we want to do is we want to educate users on that next generation, right? Where it comes to understanding where your passkeys are stored or your passwords are stored and how to get them back on a new platform. I think that is ultimately what we want users to understand. And I'm just not sure yet that we are there. I think that's kind of like the big difference. But again, the quick answer is, even if someone doesn't get it, doesn't matter. You can use passkeys. It'll work fine with the implementations today, and it'll give you there will be a benefit over the current world of having a password in your head for sure.
Yeah, just to add on to I mean, we are in like year 20 of Bluetooth. Users have no idea what it is or how it works. They just know it makes their headphones work. And that's the goal, right? Like the users have to understand all the details about what a passkey is. The most important thing is knowing that it will come back and if they need to find it where it is. And that's the same thing with, I always like to use the tap to pay analogy, right? Like when you go to a store, the user sees the tap to pay icon, right? And now we have a passkey icon. They just know what to expect. They don't have to know how it works. They know they can tap their card, phone, or watch, and away they go. And that's the goal, right? I've heard a lot of feedback that like we won't roll it out because users don't understand what the thing is. And to Christian, I push back a little bit on that. Like most technology users they don't know how it works, right? Like they kind of know what it does, and that's all you need to know, right? It's like kind of know that this makes me log in and I'm more secure. Right?
It needs to work. It just needs to work.
Yeah.
If it works every time, then that's all they really need to know. And so, like and thank you. I invented tap to pay. I appreciate that.
And on that note, Megan, I think like one thing
I want to ask about like automatic passkey creation quickly, because it in my mind, like when passkeys work, they don't need to know, but when they don't work, now they want to know, right? So like what steps can we take to make them just work always? And I know there's the idea of just giving people passkeys. Can we talk a little bit about that and like what that actually is and means?
Yeah, I mean, and also just to transition the topic a little bit, right? Like one thing I think that's really, really important is a lot of the UI and UX is pretty clean now, right? Passkeys are largely just work, but passkeys, this point about like when they don't work, it's very visible, and so like we're all in this together as websites and relying parties and platforms. So like if we have one really bad implementation of passkeys, that may ruin that for the user forever, right? Like so like
that's the whole point of getting adoption is when it works once and then they see it and they do it again and it works. That's the whole goal. It has to work, right? Absolutely. So like what steps are we taking as an alliance to, or FIDO Alliance, but also in the spec and WebAuthn to make things just work? And is it automatic passkey creation? Is it something else?
I just want to add actually one thing to what everyone has said, and also we'll come to this automatic passkey creation. I think what the biggest barrier, what I see is, again, like, I think it just have to work. Yes, for sure. The barrier I see is actually less about technology. It's more about the human behavior. It's like for years, people have used. I'm coming from India, and I see a lot of average users how they use the phones and the authentication. So users are like, people have always been trained to type passwords, or maybe I think I would say the other major authentication mechanism which is being used here. Christian has been here, and we have been talking a lot about the SMS OTP. So they are very used to it. They find it like super easy, of course. Like, so shifting that habit takes time. And even when passkeys we say very simple, seamless, sometimes users don't understand the mental model, where they are stored, how they are synced, why the app is asking for a fingerprint. So I think that's one of the experience, I think, where we really have to work on. And I think, as I think I have previously mentioned, that it's all about education, and also hovering that it works across your devices plus platforms. I think that's a major benefit. Also, the ease, I think users really need to know. And coming to the automatic passkey creation, of course, we are removing that huge UX barrier, I would say, by just providing creating the passkey behind the scenes for existing password users, and they just get it. And next time when they have to sign in, they could just use it. But we really need to be very cautious to let users know that we are not really breaching any privacy of theirs. We are just making their lives easy by providing another credential, and they don't have to go through all these steps to create that. And next time they just find it easier, quicker sign in. So I think that should be the goal. Even if we say automatic passkey creation, they shouldn't feel like the app has taken control over their device, something like that. Yes.
I think it's important.
You made a really good point about geographies. Geography is important when we communicate to users. In India, for example, you talked about India. In Australia, for example, those folks are very security minded. They have been trained to think for things. In the United States, I would argue people don't care. But it is different across geography. So you actually should communicate differently to your users based on geo, and think about that if you're a global organization and you're rolling things out. Rue, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, just adding to the automatic passkey generation, like the way it's set up, like certain conditions have to be met, right? The password manager has to have that capability, the RP has to request it, and the user typically has to have just signed in with a password within that password manager. So I don't want people to have the impression that without any activity from the user, somehow a passkey gets generated in the background. There are certain conditions that have to be met. And I agree that it is helpful to pop up to the user and a little toast to show that that passkey is created. But this is an evolution of the standard, and it does require platforms, at least passkey providers, credential managers, to implement this functionality. So I think this is something that is going to increase, hopefully, over the next year or so.
So we have 10 minutes left. I know everyone, you're all in the questions, so I would love it if you wanted to, Tim, you want to pick one to answer, or do you want me to pick?
Sure. So the most recent one that came in was interesting, around like associating with platform biometrics. I guess this one irks me personally because, like, from a technical standpoint, right, Face ID and Touch ID aren't authenticators. They're just biometric modalities that happen to be branded by Apple. So, like, even when you're saying from a technical standpoint, they authenticate with Touch ID, no, they didn't. They used a passkey that happened to use biometrics, right? Like, so that's just, the Xerox effect, right, of everyone calling it that. But you're not using, the authenticator is not Touch ID, like, just to clarify.
And we don't advocate for communicating that way. I definitely don't. Because what we see in our UX research with consumers is that the idea of the biometrics, that's private. You have to make sure that you're communicating to your users that if you do approve a sign-in. It's to approve the use of your passkey. It's not your passkey. That information is not being sent to the RP, the service in question. And folks really are concerned about that. And once you tell them, hey, this is just to approve, not to be sent, they are much more on board with passkeys in general. So I think that we need to be sure we do want to associate things that are familiar, but we don't want to tell them that that's what the passkey is.
Right. I mean, the common verbiage that's used is, right, like signing with a passkey using your face, fingerprint, or device pin, right? Like that's a common phrase. Because also, like, I'm not a lawyer, but like probably shouldn't be using trademarks without asking either. So it gets a little weird with those names. So that's kind of the generic answer to that, right? And you know, there are many implementations that predate passkeys that did use that terminology because, again, we didn't really have a consumer-friendly name for these things. Now that we do,
and there was a question about like using biometrics or pins and things like that. So it's using the device's built-in security feature, and it could be a pattern, it could be a pin. We're agnostic. The spec is agnostic, right? So it's not dependent on using a biometric.
The next question. Oh, Tim, you go.
No, you're good.
I see one question here, which is around benchmark passkey adoption stats by touchpoint, in particular, like making a user register a passkey post sign-in intercept or speed bump, as we call it at Google, versus putting it in some registration page and telling the user to go there. I think this is a very simple one. We have I guess like billions of these events, and I think we're able to give a fairly robust answer to this question. For us, best case average, we've seen that post sign-in intercepts give you a roughly 50% take rate. So roughly 50% of users end up registering a passkey. And of course, this means accepting the prompt that appears, going through the motions and registering that passkey ultimately, versus putting something in settings and telling users to go there. You can expect a less than 5%. So it's almost like a 10x improvement between a speed bump and putting something in settings. For us, I think, you might ask the question, was it surprising to see an only 50% take rate for something that you put right in the user's face? Yeah, I mean, it kind of like was, to a certain extent, there are certain platforms where we see the number nudge slightly higher. And I think those are the platforms where users are more comfortable with using biometrics in a day-to-day environment, right? Platforms such as Windows, which technically has these capabilities in Windows alone, but lots of users don't have fingerprint sensors. They might need to rely on a PIN code. There, the numbers bring that global average down a little bit, but I think on average, 50% is a good benchmark to shoot for. And then, of course, you get diminished returns. If you serve the same thing to the same user second, third, fourth time, of course, the numbers tends to go down. But on average, about 50% and about 10 times less for settings is what we've seen on our platforms.
So, Christian, would you say that's because of the point in time that we're at, or because of where the maturity is of the Google implementation? Because you know what I mean. I think you know what I mean. But what I'm saying is, like, Google has been an you are the first implementer of passkeys.
Yeah.
So is it where Google is at with the implementation that you can prompt people after sign in and get 50%? Or is it where we're at as an industry in time where any RP could do that and get 50%?
I think any RP should be able to do that and get 50% if they have a fairly decent implementation, which, by the way, most RPs have nowadays, right? I mean, we're come a long way since the early days, I think, where services allowed users to register like only one passkey, and when you register a second one, it overwrites the first. I mean, that type of thing, I think, is now long gone. We're in a place where things work much better. I think 50% is something folks can shoot for, but I want to bring in a third argument, right? You spoke about, like, is it where Google is, or is it just a market maturity thing? I think there's a third element here as well, and it's just human nature. I think 50% of users are just not in the mood to do these kind of things when you ask them, right? They just seem to not, it doesn't matter what you ask them, when you put something in front of them, they're going to swat it away, right? And I think that is what we need to start to focus on a little bit. And we're starting to figure out what's our goals for next year. And do we want to lean in more into these 50% of users who are just swatting stuff away? Very, very hard to get those users to give them a compelling value proposition, because number one, they're not even going to read your value proposition. They're just going to close out on it. You need to do something else. And right now, I think that's part of what we're interested to also discuss as part of, you know, the larger FIDO community, is how do we reach that last mile, that last 50% of users who at this point in time is kind of going like, you know what, I might have better things to do right now. How do we bring them into the ecosystem as well? I think it's going to be a combination of time, right? Once Passkeys get to the point where everyone knows that's the thing you do, I think it's going to be easier, but it's also going to be making the value proposition more compelling, which ties back into my earlier statement around either make it harder for the user to go past it. It's like, no, you cannot read your email unless you register a passkey right now, which, you know, might be controversial. Or number two is taking some functionality later in the product, or downgrading some functionality, some sensitive, you know, product surfaces, because the user have not set their passkey up yet.
You could make Google Slides even worse.
No comment. I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Does anyone have one that is burning that they would like to answer? Otherwise, I'll choose.
I'll quickly maybe have a go at Pablo Huerta's question. How can passkey authentication be implemented in mobile and web applications, and what are the advantages offered to traditional passwords? So Apple and Google have great documentation. If you have a native app on iOS or Android, you don't need to think about how WebAuthn works on a JavaScript level. You'll have native either Kotlin APIs or Swift APIs that you can plug in directly. And if you do that, you know, it's like calling a promise, and the operating system will take over. Whether it's using a third-party password provider or the system provider, you'll get back a passkey response, and that's all you need to worry about. What are the, you know, advantages compared to traditional passwords? Well, passwords are probabilistic. You know, you have to hope that the user types in the right things. You have to hope that the password manager has detected the field. Passkeys is a standard, and, you know, there's like an API that we can plug into, so you get that guarantee that the passkey will be created and it's going to work, which I think is the big difference between a password manager trying to autofill passwords versus plugging into an API and guaranteeing that the passkey is delivered.
Just a quick plug, passkeys.dev. If you go to reference and then Android or iOS or macOS, all of those links on how to do native are there as well, for both web views and full native.
Yeah, I'd also say passkeys.dev has a lot of great information about like supported features and like so there was questions about compatibility, supported features and things like that. And passkeys.dev has a ton of information on that, and it's up to date because Tim updates it, and we appreciate him very much.
And there was a comment I'll address live as well. There was an ask around like, can you document all browser extension-based credential managers, et cetera? So the answer, unfortunately, is no, right? It's an open ecosystem. Anyone can build a credential manager. What passkeys.dev tries to do is highlight what's available to all users by default, which are the built-in credential managers. Because the most important thing as a developer for a relying party is ensuring the user can be successful with something, right? And so the status, like that entire matrix is about like what's available to users by default. The user may add on their own stuff on top of that, which is great, but like you can guarantee that if you're on this Windows version or this Android version 9+, whatever, you have access to create a passkey. And that is, from a global kind of ecosystem standpoint, the most important detail. And we try to cover unique things that happen with some of the top credential managers, but we just cannot try. I mean, there's like 100+ if you actually count all the open source variants of KeyPass and all these things. So it's one of the downsides, all positive on open ecosystem, but one of the downsides is keeping track of it is very difficult, but that's what it is.
There's one more question, Megan. Just wanted to quickly touch on that. Is like, other than login, are we seeing that passkey authentication being used in other areas of authenticated space? Like,
oh yeah, let's touch on that. Yes, let's touch on that, and then we'll go on. Thank you.
Sure. So while login is a primary use case, which we see, Passkeys is actually being explored in other areas as well within those authenticated sessions. Like, yes, of course, we have been seeing some fintech apps and wallets which are testing passkeys to authorize the transactions instead of they are just relying on OTP or PINs. And of course, we have the account recovery use cases where passkeys can actually replace your other alternatives as SMS or emails to re-authenticate your users and verify maybe the new devices too. Apart from that, I just want to touch upon passkeys are now not just limited to authentication. We have been exploring, we just touched on payments. We have identity also, which is via digital credentials. I really wanted to call it out, but we never got a topic on that. So we have digital credentials where you might have your mobile drive license, passports, boarding pass. These all are maybe in your digital wallets. So these verifiable documents can be used to authenticate, authorize, and have your app or website have the verified information from the user, and maybe it could actually cater some use cases where you really want to verify if this is a valid user or not. So yes, we are expanding not just authentication, it's now authentication, identity, payments, recovery, a lot.
So I love that as a closer because you're teasing a lot of great things that are coming from the FIDO Alliance in the next couple of months, which leads me to just ask you all if you will come back in January for another AMA. And you actually can't say no because I'm putting you on the spot. But I want to. It's wonderful that you make yourselves available to our community with your knowledge, and we couldn't even get to all of the questions, of course. And I just want to thank you for being here and doing this. And if you're on the line, and thank you for being here, and we didn't get to your question, we will read through the questions and get back to you. But we will have our folks back. And you did tease some things that are coming from the FIDO Alliance in terms of expanding where we're adding value and into identity and wallets and things like that. So I do think that we will be back to you in a few months and give you another AMA because there will be even more questions and more things to answer. So thank you for being with us. And I always say the same thing. We hope to see you on a future FIDO Alliance webcast. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.